Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, back by popular demand, Senior Vice President of Global Innovation for GDR Creative Intelligence, James Mullen.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me? Good heavens, I think I need to lie down after those videos. They were so intense, maybe a cold shower. I'm thrilled to be back. I was here last year. Hopefully some of you remember me. And I've got a really exciting brief today, as you can see here, about the shifting role of LP as retail itself changes. I'm a retail expert, not an LP expert. So I'm going to take you outside the realms of LP itself, but then bring you back, hopefully, in a narrative arc that makes sense at the end. I've got a lot to get through in about 30 to 35 minutes before Dan comes on and grills me about what I've said. So I'm going to get straight into it. I should also warn you that the last 2 weeks I've had a bit of a cold. So if at any point I sound like Louis Armstrong gargling gravel, you'll know why. Okay, like I did last year, I want you guys to be involved in this session. So I'm going to invite you now to grab your smartphones. I know you have them with you. When do you ever not? And I want you to go, whatever your web browser is, to Slido. That's sli.do or slido.com. Both will take you to the same place. And when you get there, you'll be asked to enter a code. The code for today's session is Mickey, for pretty obvious reasons. It's Mickey with an E, not Mikey, in case you didn't know how to spell that. So type in Mickey. Is everyone getting this? People nod at me. Slido. Yeah, you're getting in. Slido.com. Great. Okay, hashtag Mickey. And when you get in, you'll see an iPhone screen or whatever phone you have, sharp that looks like this, with questions and polls. We don't have time for questions in this session, I'm afraid. Although if you ask them, I might try and respond to you later. But what I want you to click on is the right-hand side, which is polls. Right now it'll be vacant, but I'm going to populate it during the session with a couple of quick questions to get your feelings on what I'm talking about. So, to start this off, let me go back to... Right, I'm going to ask you a question just to test if you've got the hang of this. And the question I'll ask you first up is, how many times have you attended NRF Protect? Are you kind of like Madonna, and this is your first time? Are you kind of like a sorority sophomore girl? It's a phrase we don't use in England, but you get the idea. Are you back for your second time? Are you getting into the swing of things? Is this your third to the fifth time? Are you starting to realize, a bit like Elton John, you have a bit of a problem, and you might have an addiction 6 to 10 times, or are you literally part of the furniture, and kind of like Clint Eastwood, are you getting better with age every time you come more than 10 times? So let's see what you think. What you do now is you click the one you want and click send on the button, and we'll see, like a horse race, what's going on. Okay, here we go. So a lot of you are being touched the very first time, which is something I didn't expect to say, but that's exciting. A couple of people are absolute legends that have been here a million times, but as I expected, there's a few, but most of you actually are in the swing of this. You've been here quite a few times. Okay, that's really useful to know. Keep voting. I know there's more of you than that. And we'll use this same tool throughout the session to get some responses, some slightly more sensible questions. Okay, so I'm going to pause that one for now and go back to my session. Right. This time last year, hopefully some of you remember, I was talking about the way that actually I think loss prevention teams can be the heroes within their organizations. Because what we used to think of as two things that were kind of sitting separately, the idea of increased store security and better customer experience, that these two things were polar opposites of the same thing. Because the idea that you're spying on customers meant their experience was being, diminished. What I tried to talk about last year, hopefully you'll remember, is some various technologies that are being employed by LP teams already, like micro RFID tags in clothing and in packaging, loyalty by face and facial recognition, and even obviously security cameras and the likes of Amazon Go. And the point I was trying to make last year, hopefully you'll remember, is that these things now allow LP teams to actually use their same technologies to improve customer experiences, such that these two things are no longer mutually exclusive. They can sit very nicely together. I'm going to build on this idea today, the idea that not all heroes wear capes, and that LP teams can genuinely be the heroes within your organizations. Things that your CFO might previously consider a payoff investment, so security cameras, are they worth it if they reduce theft? In the future, what I talked about last year was actually security cameras can be used to reduce theft, but also to improve the customer experience. And I'll come back later to why I think customer experience is now the crucial component in every brand of the future. So we'll build on this as we go through the session. I'm going to do three things. I'm going to start by talking about retail at a fairly high level, the consumer context and how that's changing. And you'll see how this will make sense later. Then I'll talk about how this directly affects loss prevention and where, as we move beyond stores, we have to change the way we work to move into some new spaces. And then finally, hopefully, I'll tie this up in a neat bow that helps you understand why I think this is so, so important, and why actually I think LP teams potentially have the potential to completely change and drive their businesses forward. It's not just about catching bad guys anymore, it's about building a brand. And I'll come back to why you guys need to have a seat at that table at the very end. So, I'll do my best to race through this. The contemporary context. So, in the old days, when we had just physical retail, in some ways, and I don't want to diminish this at all, but in some ways maybe our job was relatively easy. Keep our assets safe inside the box. They only leave if people pay for them. But of course, retail itself is evolving. Because what used to happen was the physical store, whether you wanted to buy a toothbrush or an automobile, the physical store was the mediating point between supply and demand. So if you wanted a toothbrush, you went to Walgreens or wherever it was, and they were the ones to supply you with that particular product. And it worked for years. In the last sort of 15 years, of course, the growth of the internet started to shift that mediating point, and it's starting to slowly fragment. But where I think this is going, very, very quickly, far more quickly than I suspect any of us are prepared for, is this, where we're going to have hyper-fragmentation of all the ways you can interact with a brand and shop from a brand. Put in the simplest terms, retail no longer happens just in stores or on traditional websites. Now it happens everywhere and happens seamlessly. You probably recognize the IKEA Place app that allows you to buy this hideous yellow couch in your bedroom or in your living room from the comfort of your iPhone. Bottom left, in China now, most of the beggars actually have QR codes to allow you to give them money when you don't have any cash. And in London, you can now pay a busker with a contactless credit card. Everyone has contactless in London. And weirdly, the car is becoming a burgeoning new channel for retail. Anyone who's got a new General Motors car will have noticed that they have all these apps now pre-installed for the last 18 months that allow you to buy your Starbucks coffee, your Dunkin' Donuts, even your fuel from Shell from the dashboard of your car before you swing into the drive-thru and grab it on your way to work. It's already paid for what it's done. So suddenly the car is a genuine bona fide retail channel. In San Francisco now, if you're an Uber driver with 4.5 rating or above, you can now install this effectively mini vending machine in the back of your Uber. This picture's out of date. It's now integrated with the Uber app, which allows the consumer in the back, or the passenger, to buy a snack, or if you're in an Uber pool, maybe you need to get some condoms, whatever it is. You can buy them right there from this guy in the car itself, and the driver gets 20% of the revenue that is generated from this. So it's a revenue stream for him. It's better for the customer. The car is now a space for retail. Bottom left, what you're seeing here is a book written for Kindle that is a love story that is all about a woman who falls in love multiple times. And every time she falls in love, she's wearing a different dress. And you can click through on the Kindle and buy the dress. It's extremely cynical, but I'm worried it actually might work. It's kind of the opposite of 50 Shades of Grey, where it was a happy accident we all started buying masking tape and cable ties. This one, they're deliberately trying to manipulate you to buy things. And so suddenly the Kindle is now, again, another channel for retail. So let's break this right down and really simplify it. Admittedly, this is slightly oversimplified. In the old days, your brand, whether you're a CPG brand or a store, whatever your brand is, you had a pretty simple loop for how you had success. You had Marcom's channels where you'd promote what your brand was to customers. That's a woman, not a toilet, I should say. You promoted your brand, and the only way you really knew if they liked what you projected at them was whether they bought it. So if you think of Coca-Cola in the old-fashioned way, this brand protected at all costs, open happiness, you throw that idea at customers, and they buy it. And if they buy it, you're doing well. Of course, in modern times, this has shifted because there's multiple ways to communicate. Print media, TV ads, there's a whole plethora of things that you'll be aware of. And of course, you can buy online now, you can buy multiple different ways. And of course, this is really, really proliferating now to a point where there's social media, there's lots of different ways you can buy. The point now with things like social media is this is no longer one clean loop that goes like this. Actually, those Marcoms channels, particularly in social, are becoming conversations. So the way you can interact with a brand now isn't simply by buying products or not buying products. You can slag them off on Twitter. You can like their things on Instagram, all this kind of thing. And as of literally 2019, these are amalgamated so much, and obviously this gives you more context to who your customers are, but these are amalgamated so much they've completely conflated. You can now buy on Instagram. As of this week, you can buy through Snapchat. So if in this complete conflation, the old way of thinking about brands and retail no longer, I think, applies. In the future, the way a brand thinks about building itself is by simply positioning itself in the center of this decision-making around what consumers want. And basically what that means is being there in the right context when the consumer wants you. Easier said than done. And the challenge we have, particularly as legacy brands and retailers, is that there are a whole bunch of disruptive brands, digitally native vertical brands, for example, Casper, Allbirds, those kind of brands, Everlane, or D2C brands, you might call them, that are positioned with one clear message for one clear audience to win in this space, and it seems to resonate for consumers, disrupting everything. So this is obviously fundamentally a huge challenge. And how do we stand out in this new environment? I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what well-known US brands are doing, and then I'll bring this back to LP. So, a brand you'll all know, Tide. P&G were the biggest ad spenders globally for years and years and years, with TV ads and everything. And they had this familiar, look of a Tide bottle. The big orange bottle would grab your attention in the store. You'd grab it and go. And that worked for years. They built this great brand out of it. But fundamentally, that was a proposition. They were different size bottles, but really it was one proposition in all contexts for all consumers. So really it was driven by the system rather than by the customer. It was the least bad set of compromises they could make to serve the biggest number of people. That's old retail. In the future, and in contemporary times now, actually people want more personalization. They want something designed for them. And so my point here at the very top is that product assortment, price, and scale, the way that a lot of big brands and retailers built their growth, in some ways now is no longer the core differentiator for consumers. I'll come back to retail in a second. For Tide, they recognize this. They are no longer just producing liquid in packaging on shelves. They're understanding they need to invest in experience because this is where the future is for their customers. So they trialed this a year ago, Tide Cleaners. They recently announced not a 2 or 3 store rollout. They've announced 2,000 of these spaces will be open within the US by the end of next year. Tide cleaning spaces. You can either take your clothes to be cleaned or dry cleaned. You can drop them off in your apartment. If you have a locker, they're going to start putting these everywhere. You can go to the drive-thru if you live in a more rural space, and they will take care of your cleaning. Suddenly the product itself isn't really part of the conversation. In some ways, neither is the price. It's all about the experience. They have innovated with products a little bit. The Tide Pods, any of you who ate those will probably remember that. And they're invested in things like Loop. I haven't got time to talk about Loop right now, but if you've not heard of it, it's fascinating. And of course, they were early adopters with things like Amazon Dash Replenishment. Those sort of bottom left but one, the Amazon Dash buttons, they're obviously now obsolete. But of course, they're integrated with, say, your Whirlpool washing machine, such that when you run out of Tide, it will reorder it for you through Amazon. So all about experience, all about convenience. One of the guys I follow on LinkedIn, I particularly like what he has to say. He says smart brands are no longer talking about being omnichannel. That word's been bounced around for the last 5 years, right? In the future, the key is to be omnipresent. Be there where customers need you in the right context at the right time. So let's look at another well-known brand you'll all be familiar with, Walmart. Walmart has done, I think, a really good job in the last few years of evolving to this new context. So in the past, Walmart's messaging was simple. Low prices, come and get your everyday things at a low price, swing into the store, away you go, brilliant. In the new environment, a few things have changed. The first thing is, subtly, about 2 years ago, they stopped calling themselves Walmart stores because they recognized that stores are only a piece of the puzzle. So legally, they're just called Walmart. They didn't make a big song and dance about it, but I think it's significant. And now, in this new world where they're positioning themselves at the center of everything, they've invested in lots of things. They've invested in loads of startup brands like Jet. You remember that? $3 billion about 3 years ago. Seemed expensive at the time, but they're actually starting to reap the rewards of that now. They invested in direct-to-consumer brands like Bonobos. I'll come to some of these other ones in a minute. One of the key ones they invested in was Click and Collect. In Europe, where I'm from, Click and Collect's a big thing, and we've seen retailers literally grow 16% overnight by introducing this. Walmart's introduced this, has done very, very well off the back of it, and they obviously thought this was important to back because they bought the licensing for pretty much every single car and every single advert for the Super Bowl to run this ad top right to push the idea that you could now click and collect, drive in with your car, grab your shopping, having bought it online. Bottom left, this is a company, this is Jet Black, which is a spin-off of Jet.com, which is aimed at affluent mothers. The idea that mothers with young children are so busy, they haven't got time to go shopping and worry about that. So here they give you AirPods, and you have your phone, of course, and you can either speak voice or text, effectively a digital concierge to say, I need diapers, I need whatever it is you need for babies. I don't have any kids, I've got a dog. Or you say, I need help with my kids' birthday parties, tell me what I need to do. And this concierge will basically take care of everything for you. So they're really moving into this very much more experiential space. And top left, you probably are aware of this, I imagine. It was rolled out last year in Silicon Valley with August Homes as a test, but they've now just announced last week that this will be pushed into 3 cities nationwide, direct-to-fridge delivery for Walmart groceries. So you shop online, you don't even have to be at home. The Walmart employee lets them into your home, even when you're not there, and stocks your fridge, so when you get home, it's all ready to go. I'll come back to that in a second. The point about this is understanding within retail anyway, there is a dichotomy happening between the ways that people shop. There's shopping, which is the kind of Eataly experience, which is a leisure experience. It's emotionally engaging. It's designed to be slow and savored on the left. Or there's, frankly, the buying experience, which is when you have a necessary evil. Shit, I need a toothpaste. I need whatever it is. I need a sandwich. And that's what Amazon Go has built, which is basically one click in the digital world in the physical space. And you know by now that they're rolling this out to about 2,000 locations in the US in the next 12 months. So my question for you right now, and be honest, this is all completely anonymous, is where do you sit on that spectrum? Where does your brand exist? Whether you're a retailer or a brand or even a hospitality group, where do you exist? Are you about an experience-driven interaction, or you're about convenience-driven, a necessary evil which has to be frictionless? So let me just make that live. And I've given you 5 options, so take a second to think about this. Are you basically right at the buying end, where it's all about convenience, getting things what they want? Or are you more about somewhere in the middle? Or are you more about this leisure-driven experience? And I'd be interested to see what you think. So right now, most of you are somewhere down the middle. You think you're kind of offering both, which rightly, of course, you should. But for the most part, you're moving towards the idea of more shopping, actually. Well, actually, it's kind of both. Some of you are all shopping, 70% shopping, some of you are 70% buying. Okay, interesting. So if I think about, in particular, the right-hand side of this dichotomy, the idea of buying and necessary evil and convenience-driven retail, I think we can talk about a big shift happening that I think has got a big implication for loss prevention. Because, of course, if we move to a future beyond the store, there are a whole plethora of new spaces we need to be concerned and thinking about. And I imagine, from an LP perspective, or frankly from anyone's perspective, you work at a big retailer, the idea of employees unattended going into your customers' homes probably sends a shiver up your spine. But the reality is, this is coming. This curve here is the speed of adoption of new technologies. So you probably know this stat that Pokemon Go reached 50 million users in 19 days. It took airlines 64 years to reach that. So the exponential curve of technology is only getting quicker. And if we underestimate that, we're going to be in for a shock. The way it works at Walmart is that when you do the in-home direct-to-fridge delivery, they mitigate, I guess, LP problems by having a camera, kind of like a cop, on your lapel, records what you're doing. It allows the shopper, once they let you into their home, to track what you're doing through that camera. And of course, a lot of these homes have to have a smart lock in the first place with a one-time entry code. And often these homes often have cameras as well as part of that, watching what people are up to. So to a certain extent, they can mediate this a little bit. But it's exactly why Amazon bought Ring a year or so ago, the biggest home security company in the US, as I understand it. And of course, most people have Ring, probably do have cameras in their home as well. And it's obviously because Amazon imagines a future where they can just open the door to your home and drop the packages inside. It's kind of funny, because when you think about, you know, back in the 90s when I was still fairly young, my mum would say to me, do not get into a car with strangers. It's probably pretty good advice. In the noughties, it was, you know, when the internet dating first came along, do not meet anyone from the internet alone. Just to show you how quick things are changing, now it's like, yeah, go out, have 15 pints, get into a stranger's Prius with another stranger you met online, go for it. So it seems like a crazy idea, but 7 years ago, if I'd said that to you, you'd think I was mad. Things change. Things will change quickly, quicker than we've ever thought, and we need to be ahead of it. It is worth mentioning, though, that Amazon, having trialed this for a few months, did admit that there were what they called emotional concerns from customers about letting couriers into their home when they weren't there. So the way they've mitigated this in the meantime is by doing it with people's garages, because they felt that was a little bit less intrusive. However, I do firmly believe this will come. Another space Amazon's been really bright is they've integrated with Volvo and General Motors to allow you to effectively use the boot of your car, the trunk of your car, as a click and collect location. So you can have a one-time entry key, just opens the boot, drop in your package, and away you go. The point about all this is that this future that we're looking at now is completely dependent on, obviously, delivery. And there is now a huge arms race happening between Amazon, FedEx, UPS, everybody else, probably your own supply chains potentially, about where you can win. So much so that last week Amazon has kind of fallen out of favor with FedEx. It's only 1.5 to 2% of their whole shipping, supposedly. It surprises me. I thought it might be more than that. And FedEx has decided to write that off because they're worried that Amazon is building, you know, a kind of their own behemoth that will effectively fight them. So this is becoming competitive. What Amazon's now doing, and I think this is amazing, is offering employees up to $10,000 and 3 months' pay to start their own delivery business. They give you a Sprinter Mercedes van. Sounds better than driving an Uber to me, and people have flocked to this in their thousands, so much so they've had to actually scale this back, because the problem wasn't the demand, the problem was they couldn't supply enough of the Mercedes Sprinter vans. They already ordered 20,000, they originally ordered 5,000, had to order another 20,000, Mercedes was like, whoa, slow down, we need a bit longer to get this ready. So we're in this point now where, in this new future beyond the store, it's very, very likely, unless we were really organized, that we are going to be dependent on gig economy workers to fulfill promises to customers, particularly in terms of, obviously, delivery. And that is worrying for us because we have limited control. What Amazon now does, it's also what Uber does actually, I believe, is they now make their delivery drivers take regular selfies, like every half hour or something, to check that they are where they say they are and it's them that's driving, they haven't outsourced it, they have control over who's responsible for what. But it feels a little bit Big Brother. It's maybe not the nicest way to operate, but what is the solution? No one's really quite figured this out. In China, Alibaba, they've launched this, it's still a concept, but it's effectively a locker that sits outside people's apartments at their home, and the delivery driver has a facial recognition to scan that it's them, and that opens the locker, and they put inside whatever it is you've ordered and then shut it and go. Supposedly it's pretty secure. What I also think is brilliant about this is if you're out for a run or you're out at work, whatever you put in that locker, you can then control the temperature of that locker. So if it's hot food like a takeaway, you can keep it warm, or if it's champagne for an evening of drinking, you can keep it cool from your smartphone when you're not even there. So they're really thinking about this future, which is all about delivery in a secure way. It expands 3 times to make space for a whole bunch of different possibilities. But as I understand it, based on some of the data I've been reading in the build-up to this, sweethearting, you know, theft from employees, is a bigger problem. And if we move to this gig economy future, is that even more worrying? Because people maybe don't feel the same attraction, connection to the brands they're working for. Supposedly, and I've seen different numbers for this, one of the NRF things I saw said 50 billion, but I read from Nvidia that it's $100 billion. Whatever it is, the point is about half of the costs of shrinkage is in the US alone, $50 billion, which is staggering. So much so that brands are trying ways to kind of keep on top of this. And again, I don't know how I feel about this, but Amazon has started planting fake packages that are undeliverable to see if they get delivered back to the depot or whether they are stolen by the drivers. because they can't trust them enough. So what is the future of this? Naturally, it is too simple to just put all these thefts on the delivery supply chain, the fulfillment chain, down to gig economy or unscrupulous employees. The bigger problem, of course, or another big problem, is parcel thieves. We're aware of this. Many of you will have seen this. If it's stolen from one of the porches of one of our customers, it probably technically may not be our problem if it's been delivered, but you can be sure as hell that it's going to be, well, it's may not be our fault rather, it's going to be our problem. Because if you have a bad experience, you blame that person once, you tell 9 other people, you never use them again. So what can we do about this? I'm going to skip this video for time because I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's the NASA employee who built this effectively porch bomb that would spray fart spray all over the people who stole it to catch them out. If you want to find it, it's...
This guy took a package from my porch, and now he's about to open it in his car, but what he doesn't know is this is a custom-built bait package that is recording him on 4 different cameras, and it's about to unleash a pound of the world's finest glitter, along with some other surprises. So the idea is the bad guy comes and takes it off your porch, then lifts the lid, and these 2 limit switches tell the circuit board brain inside that the lid's been removed, and then that sets everything in motion. And I may be biased, but sometimes a well-engineered design is beautiful.
I'll skip it for time. If you haven't seen it, it's very easy to find online. So what do we do about this? Something I literally saw yesterday is a company called Root that is set up fundamentally first and foremost for customers to make their lives easier. The idea that you can put every single one of your online shopping buys through the same app and track them all in the same space. So you have a better customer experience as a consumer. You can see where your Nikes are coming from alongside your Walmart food delivery, alongside everything, rather than multiple tracking numbers, multiple different apps, all the rest of it. But interestingly, of course, they've also thought very carefully about the merchandise, the retailer perspective. And so what happens here is they actually have Lloyd's of London, 330 years of very bona fide and credible insurance company backing this, to provide insurance even for things like porch theft. So that when a claim is filed, the refund is ordered within 24 hours. And basically, rather than a loss, you get an extra order because they reorder it for the customer and redeliver it. You can have another look at the app. But if you look at their frequently asked questions, I thought this sounds way too good to be true. They point out, they actually call out deliberately the likes of FedEx and UPS and say that actually once they leave your product on the porch of the customer, they basically wash their hands of it. It's not their problem anymore. But like I say, it's your problem if that thing gets stolen. So with Root, you're fully insured, even after it's delivered, which I think is a really interesting shift. How this will eventually make money is anyone's guess, but we'll see. The other thing worth touching on, of course, is I've talked mainly about human delivery. In the not too distant future, we're going to see drone delivery, of course. And of course, you imagine that maybe it'll be easier to control tech rather than people in terms of what's prepared to go rogue. These are a whole series of land-based drones that are currently being worked on. Of course, Amazon's in the case of it. Top right is one in Sweden that has its own locker that it deliberately puts it into, so it looks really secure. But actually, you could still follow that thing and just start sealing packages whenever it stops to deliver anything. So there's no doubt that actually, however much you try, there are still unscrupulous agents who will find a way to muscle in and disrupt you even when you use new technology. In fact, so much so, this is KiwiBots. I think this is at Berkeley. And I know from data that most of you are suffering with decreased budget on headcount within loss prevention. And yet you still need people to police this for sure, because technology is not infallible. This one, someone knew something expensive was being delivered, so they just set the thing on fire to actually get it open. And that's terrible PR, it's not great, obviously things get lost, etc. So what can you do to try and limit your exposure in this new environment? Drones are coming, I'm certain of that. So far it's not the technology that's behind, it's the legislation. But it will catch up. We're starting to see it already happen in places like New Zealand, where it's more rural and there's less concerns about mid-air collisions and all that kind of thing. But it will come. But even then, how do you make sure this stuff is protected? What they're doing in China, this is admittedly business to business through DHL, but they are now doing drones that come out of a delivery position and drop into one that are effectively completely untouchable by consumers, and they leverage facial recognition to make sure the right person's picking up the package at the right time. So So this could be a consumer execution eventually as well. So the point fairly obviously is if we move to a future beyond the store where fulfillment is an increasingly important part of it, the way you make this easier and safer for customers, the more you can differentiate and show strength here, the more likely they are to buy from you. And suddenly product and price is actually less relevant. Convenience is what everyone seems to care about now. Everyone's time poor, but they have the funds for what they need. So let's bring this into a loop about why I think this is really, really relevant for you guys. Because, well, let's think about it. In the old days, like I say, we go back to that idea of a box chained up with all your stuff inside. And the idea of a store itself was a fairly easy social contract for everyone to understand. As a shopper, I got it. If I go in and give you money for something, I can walk out with it. That's fairly easy to understand. The customer, the store, on the other hand, agrees to supply that product to me if I'm prepared to pay for it. Pretty simple. Everyone understood it. It's been around forever. And it gave us a fairly straightforward social contract or set of parameters within which to operate and within which the control of the experience was. For LP, it was protecting products and mitigating against theft. But in this new environment, where everything's up for grabs, I would say this is completely subject to change and is going to evolve. Now, what am I talking about? This is when I come back to the idea I mentioned right at the beginning about brand. What makes a brand? Why does a brand win or lose? In the old days, I said, Coca-Cola, that's just one example, but I had this idea of a beautiful brand presented at customers and people would either buy it. In the future, customer experience is king, however that looks. So I'm going to show you an example I think is a great example of that, which is Nike. Everyone understands just do it. But what's amazing about Nike is they are no longer just this sort of perfect, wrapped up idea of what Nike is. It's not just a set of logos, fonts, colors laid out in a glossy handbook. Today, Nike is the sum, I should say, of all of the interactions it has with its customers. And they are completely, mixed. They are stores, they are sports collaborations, in completely different sectors, like golf pros in Texas versus Kaepernick and taking a knee. And how they keep these things separate and build the idea of their brand is built off every different interaction, sometimes digital, sometimes physical. Everything together adds up to create what is Nike. They have the same kind of attitude beneath everything, but it's not one thing. The brand itself isn't created, it emerges out of all these experiences. And I think this is the point about modern branding. The brands that we'll see in the future are the ones that are not one perfect thing created. They are something you control. You don't control, you influence. And customer experience isn't downstream of the brand. In the future, I say the whole brand is the customer experience. And so if we think about all the things I've just been discussing, this means that things are going to change. In the old day, loss prevention sat somewhere between the products assets you're protecting and the customers that were buying things. If we accept that what I'm saying is true, I hope you do, and the biggest bubble you need to try and swell to win in the future is customer experience, lifetime customer value, that's how a brand on a bigger level will win, then clearly, I'm sorry if this is a terrible graphic, it's the best I could think to present this, but the spaces that LP plays in are now much more important because you're on the front line, I should say, mediating this interweaving tapestry between the retailer, the customer, the intermediate who delivers it, and the would-be thieves that want to muscle in on this exchange. And so your role actually, I think, is far more important than it's ever been in terms of building the brand. And so my point is that if any part of this experience breaks, it risks destroying your entire brand thereafter. You know from your personal experience, having, I don't know, I'm picking this a bit at random because I had an experience last week, flying Southwest. If one bad thing happens on that whole experience, you're writing off Southwest forever. If one employee says something that pisses you off, you're going to tar them with that same brush forever. So all those things, especially when you've got gig economy workers, all those things are now tantamount to what builds your brand, creates that experience. And that's why you have a powerful role, because you're involved in all of this, to make sure they do the right thing. So, to finish what I talked about last time, this idea that not all heroes wear capes. Last year, I argued you can be the secret innovation lab, mainly within the store, in terms of creating a better experience. But now I'm saying, more than that, in this consumer experience-driven future, LP is now the critical component, in my mind anyway, for the preservation of your whole brand, the whole future of your company, not just the assets you protect. So the thing I'd like to add to this little Venn diagram is the idea of safeguarded brand equity and trust. You have the control over that. And neatly, since last year was people, assets, brands, you've got customer experience, people, you've got store security, your assets, and yes, you've got brand. You have the control over this, and I think your role is critically important in this new future. So like I say, modern loss prevention isn't just about catching bad guys. It's a bit about that, obviously. But that's not all it is. Your roles no longer should sit downstream of the trajectory of the brand or the decisions of the board. In this new future, I think the boardrooms of successful companies will rely on LP occupying not just one, but possibly several seats in understanding where this goes. And yes, rather than being reactive as a silo within an organization, you should be proactively driving a business forward to create these better experiences, because you are at the front line of all these different experiences, especially as they move beyond the store, critically. So, just to wrap this up before Dan comes and grills me on what I've said, my first question is, how satisfied are you that your team, your LP team, has a real seat of influence at the ballroom? Are you super excited and happy and very satisfied with that? Are you like, not totally sure? Or are you like, yeah, keep dreaming? So let's see what you think. Be honest, these are anonymous as well. All right. Some of you are very happy. Well, that's good. But about 30% of you really think you're an afterthought. It's a pretty even horse race, this one. But, okay. So you're somewhere in the middle in most cases, but there's a bit of a split here, which I expected. Okay, that's fine. My final question. Sorry. My final question then is, if we believe what we read in the research in the NRF, and that we're going to see increase in spending for LP, where do we think that money should be invested? Do we think that we should invest, if we think beyond the store, in automated fulfillment, so drones and making that secure? Do we think we should think about tech at point of delivery to avoid things like porch thieves and all the rest of it? Do we actually still need to invest heavily in human headcount? Or do you think we should think about buying into this new tracking software that gives people more confidence? So I'm just giving you 4 options. And admittedly, I've deliberately in this talk not talked about cyber crime and chronic returns, just the time available, it wasn't possible. But actually, that's fascinating. Most of you still think humans are key. That's really, really interesting. Increased human headcount. Because if you believe what I quoted earlier from NVIDIA, people are expecting that to actually go down. Okay, I've run over, so I need to let Dan come and talk to me. So if you want, I know I've gone through this fast, if you want my deck at any point, my email's here, please contact me. And I think Dan's coming out. Say hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Vice President of Asset Protection at Southeastern Grocers, Dan Faculty.
Well, I'm glad you're giving me a few minutes, at least for a conversation. I think you said grilling. You're about ready to get grilled. But, hey, you do realize why you're back here, right? I mean, did anybody tell you that you were the #1 rated speaker last year at the NRF Protect conference? And then, not only that, but when they looked at the ratings, you were actually the #1 speaker over the past 4 years. So everybody give him a round of applause, because you did a great job again, right? So we heard a lot about the technology and things, but I think the audience doesn't know a lot about you. How does a journalism major who obtains a master's graduate degree from the University of Sydney get involved in this type of work? I mean, all the technology, all the innovation, yet alone grasping it and then reporting out on it.
A lot of kind of sideways moves, kind of by accident, I would say. Whenever people ask me about career advice, I say don't try and plan it, just throw the net wide and see what happens. And I was a journalist originally, you're right, used to work freelance for a whole bunch of people, including Sky TV and football magazine, or soccer I should say, all that kind of stuff. And then found my way into kind of marketing, what you would probably call content marketing agency, digital storytelling they used to call it, which I found a bit nauseating. But then from that, I kind of originally came to GDR to run our research team. We've got a big research function, which is where all the stuff that I showed comes from. But what I missed then was being client-facing. And so I found my way, in front of lots of big companies. And as far as I'm concerned, this is still a sort of a journalism job because it's storytelling. You're trying to explain things in terms that people can understand. And this is a human business, same as retail generally is a human business. It's about connecting people to people.
I mean, you're pretty passionate about this stuff, that's obvious, but what excites you the most about all of the technology and the innovation, at least that you get to see? And most importantly, as a follow-up, how do you see that elevating the position of loss prevention in companies, especially with respect to the brand? Because you talked about the brand, you consistently talk about the brand. How can loss prevention executives elevate their own programs?
Well, I think hopefully it came across in what I was showing, which is that the role of loss prevention, it's kind of in the title of it, it's about stopping bad guys and theft. But I feel as though when we move to this new future where it is about new technologies dramatically shifting the nature of what retail traditionally looks like, of course, the people that have to be at the table are loss prevention and legal. And my experience to date, and this is why I wanted to try and make the point, is that those two functions tend to be the ones that are more often not putting the handbrake on innovation and changes because, rightly in some cases, of fear, that things they can't keep up, they'll leave themselves liable. My personal feeling is that actually that's why this loss prevention teams have to be right at the forefront, at the most innovative end of the spectrum, not reactive but more proactive, to be thinking ahead, one step ahead to drive the change. And if that happens, your company can evolve quicker and win quicker because the demand from customers for this shift is there. I don't want to go to the store anymore if I can avoid it in most cases.
And I think it's safe to say, because we did have a brief conversation back room, that you're not a loss prevention expert. You don't pretend to be a loss prevention expert. But in your travels, I mean, you're in hundreds of companies every single year. You're either assisting with the development of strategies or you're giving presentations very similar to this one. Have there been any conversations at all that were specific where loss prevention comes up, either good, either bad, anything that really stands out to you?
Yes, definitely. I'm trying to think how to answer this without naming names. But last week, I was in San Francisco talking to a very well-known, I better not say the sector even, very well-known company over some beers in the evening, wine I should say, and she, who works in the Innovation Lab, revealed, when I explained I was talking at the LP conference this week, NRF Protect, she said, I do know about NRF Protect. I expected her not to, actually, because she's right in the weeds with loss prevention right at this moment, trying to drive something forward. And like I say, they were putting the handbrake on things. And so her actual impression of it was frustration. So again, I can't say if that's true of everybody, but that was her experience. And so that also was that kind of funny if that's what influenced a lot of how I shifted my way of presenting what I presented today.
That's a good call out, especially as innovation takes us in a whole new direction. I mean, if you're not on board and if you're not really attempting to predict what is occurring as opposed to reacting what is occurring, you're probably going to be left behind. At least I would think that you're going to be left behind, either as an organization, a person, or maybe even a department. So that's a good call out. I saw one of your slides as I was backstage, and I pulled out really fast a quote: "The liability of having employees in customers' homes unattended is likely to send shivers up the spine of loss prevention teams." And as I saw that quote, I was thinking, man, if you think that sends shivers up the spines of loss prevention people, you ought to see CEOs yeah. when we have conversations about sending employees directly to people's homes. I would think there's a pretty big opportunity from a loss prevention standpoint with respect to that, or becoming involved in that, even from a pre-employment screening standpoint. Mm-hmm. Agree, disagree, or you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the fairly obvious use case, which is like grocery delivery and things like that. But we're already seeing it in other sectors like technology, where, right now when I have an iPhone, every time I want to get a new iPhone, I don't want to have to go to the store and have it all set up. So there's various companies now, AT&T has partnered with Enjoy to allow them to come to you at your office or your home and interact with you and set up your technology, set up a drone or whatever it is you bought from them. And there's a certain amount of risk there, but also there's a huge opportunity, because actually when you invite, if you think about the old days when the vacuum cleaner salesman back in the 70s was trying to get his foot in the door to sell you a vacuum cleaner, in the modern environment, we're inviting brands into our homes. Amazon, we invite Amazon Echo to sit in and listen to all me and my wife's arguments. And we invite people like Enjoy to come into our homes and set up our technologies. That is actually a huge opportunity beyond the point of loss prevention. If you think more broadly, which is what I'd encourage everyone to do, you can start learning about this. How many kids has this guy got? What are he's got a surfboard. And that amount of data is the kind of data you could never wish for in an exchange within a store. And so it's kind of your own opportunity for ethnographic research in a weird way that allows you to then build what I keep coming back to, which is lifetime customer value. The old way of retail, which is product and consumer and individual transactions and trying to keep those sacrosanct. In the future, it's much more about this idea of customer experience, building that brand, building lifetime customer value, even potentially at the cost or the expense of possibly some of the other things that we might right now want to protect.
I got another one for you that just came to mind. About 12 weeks ago, I ended up getting a telephone call from a major retailer, large chain in the U.S. It was from a high-level loss prevention executive that had mentioned to me that their IT department had embarked on a mission, and that mission was to develop closed-circuit TV strategies, internet protocol technology, going over broadband, and they had completely bypassed their loss prevention department. Didn't even get them involved at all. Have you heard anything like that before, or does that surprise you?
Not specific to loss prevention, but no, that doesn't surprise me at all. We work with, again, I better not name any names, but we work with some pretty big organizations where within the space of a couple of weeks I've had the same brief come from two different teams within the same business. And it's weird that me as an external consultant is putting these two pieces together. It's easier said than done that people should collaborate more, because I understand that big legacy companies, they're not structured that way, and that means a huge step change, a huge culture change. But like I said right at the beginning, with this new world where we're being faced by disruptive brands built to beat us, they are much more agile, they're much more connected, they have got much more ability to piece those pieces together and win. And so we have to find a way, it's crucial. And that includes store design, digital teams, loss prevention, legal, HR, everything has to be together to create this idea of what I keep coming back to, which is a customer experience, because you can't just have this brand and hope that everyone else follows off the same, brand pillars spreadsheet or whatever, strategic imperatives. That doesn't work anymore. For the customer, their experience of you doesn't exist outside of the experience they have. And so if that experience is in any way poor, and if anything feels disconnected, then they're going to go somewhere else.
Good call out. What advice would you give loss prevention executives if they may not be in really, really large companies that have very large budgets or payroll, and they're relying on technology, but for whatever reason, they don't seem to be getting the support, either in headcount or financially, in order to put in a lot of the proactive tools designed to minimize loss in their companies? Any advice that you've got for them, or how they can get a seat at that table?
Well, I mean, that kind of comes back to what I talked about last year, which is that I think a lot of the technologies that you guys are investing in, if you see it only as a payoff investment, as in you buy security cameras or sensors or RFID tags purely against the idea of mitigating losses, then it's very black and white. The CFO can see if it works or not. But I think if you can sell it as an infrastructure investment that can be looped in with the digital team that wants to improve the customer experience, like we see with, say, Amazon Go, or various other examples I could talk about, then clearly there's a bit more leeway for you to not necessarily immediately next quarter see a return. And you can collaborate, and I think that way it's seen as an opportunity for you rather than a problem. In terms of getting further up the food chain, I mean, I think hopefully what I conveyed today makes a reasonably strong case for the importance of LP that it isn't just, like I say, catching bad guys and this one little sort of sideline that sits in its own bunker separate to everything else. It should be right at the front line of this future of modern retail.
And last question, because we're running out of time here. If you were to build a store of the future, James, you personally now, right? And if you, based off everything you're seeing here, or at least you're demonstrating and the exposures and some of the challenges, what types of skill sets would you be looking for if you were to hire a loss prevention executive, especially if you're looking at protecting people, brand, assets, which is what you were talking about earlier?
I still think, obviously you need people who are tech savvy to a certain extent, but a phrase I heard recently which I really, really liked was that even if you work in what might traditionally be called a B2B environment, there's no such thing as B2B. Everything is B2C. And people and human to human, kind of what I was saying right at the beginning of this Q&A, is still what resonates. So what creates a customer experience is empathy for a customer, understanding their needs, their concerns. And so somebody that gets that and knows how to bring in the right technology at the right time, that's the kind of profile I'm looking for. How you put that in a job description, I'm not entirely sure. But people who get people would be my nutshell description.
All right, well, from everybody here, we appreciate you coming back. And my guess is, based off your ratings, you're probably going to be back again at least sometime in the future.
There's only one way to go now, which is down, so tee me up for that.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.